It's the next level.
Hey, panelers, welcome to the show. I'm Mark.
And I'm Steve.
And this week we're doing Daredevil Season 3, Episodes 7 and 8. So the synopsis for Daredevil Season 3, Episode 7, which is entitled Aftermath, is the press crucifies Daredevil after the attack on the Bulletin, and Agent Nadeem suspects the FBI paid too high a price for Fisk's cooperation.
Yeah, Nadeem is starting to put things together that they may have.
Yeah, he's coming around and understanding what's going on and realizing what Fisk's up to, and to some degree. Yep.
Yeah. So you want me to go ahead and start?
Yeah, we'll get to our top fives.
I'm Daredevil.
And you start.
Okay. That painting, it threw me off. Like the first time I watched the episode, I didn't really note it. But then the second time when it started and Fisk is talking about that painting and the lawyer guy says, "Oh, rabbit in a snowstorm, you mean?" And they have this whole conversation about this painting that Fisk is supposed to get to hang in the hotel suite. And he's like, "I'm supposed to get all my stuff." And he's like, "Well, there's some questions of ownership and all this." But then it's never mentioned again the rest of the episode. And even at the end, when Nadeem, comes into the hotel suite, he looks down and you can see him looking at that empty spot on the wall. So it just was a little weird that they made a point to talk about this painting, and the lawyer says there's something about the ownership, and he's like, we can use it to get leverage for something else. And Fisk just insists, no, I have to have this painting.
Maybe this is something that's going to come later on in a future episode.
I guess. I mean, we've got 5 episodes left, so, 6 episodes left.
It has to be. It has to be something that's important if they're just going to throw this in. This is not casual conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I found it interesting, too, when I saw what you wrote, and I'm like, I got to go back and watch. And I looked, and I'm like...
Because that's the only mention of it in both of these episodes, is just that few minutes there at the beginning of episode 7, and then they never bring it up again. And I'm like, what was the point of that? So I'm hoping there's got to be a point down the road.
There has to be.
Yeah.
My number 5 would be Fisk's little quote-unquote bat cave he has in the basement. Apparently he has someone there working for him as well, and sees all the footage that it quote-unquote the Daredevil that attacked. But he's also monitoring everything else that's going on in and around the complex as well.
Yeah, this was actually my number 4, so it really goes right into that. And Mrs. Shelby was what he called that woman who was down there. And it's that whole media room really seems weird. He's got all the monitors where he can watch the FBI agents. So there's a camera in the FBI agents, like their little room where they're watching him. And then there's another bank, of monitors there where he tells her to put the news footage up like you talked about. And it was really weird. And, Nadeem there at the end almost catches him, but obviously he sees Nadeem coming. And so he gets into the bed. He gets, comes upstairs and gets in bed real quick to make it look like he's been in bed the whole time.
Yeah, it's really strange. Makes me think that Fisk is actually using the FBI's monitors, or has Shelby tapping into their cameras as well. You know?
And I think we see more of this in the next episode, even where he's got even access to even more surveillance.
Yeah, he does. And yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's like him trying to recapture his throne in a sense, because if you saw when he's going through the closet and stroking all the white suit jackets, are they silk or something? Because they look so sheen and everything.
Yeah, it's shiny. I don't know.
Yeah, and then on top of that, and then he goes down. He always wears the same outfit, apparently. I guess he thinks of himself almost like an Einstein, because Einstein used to wear the same thing every day.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So that was my number 4. So I guess that brings us to your number 4.
My number 4 would be the conversation with Sister Maggie and Matt while she stitches him up. For the longest time, she's been trying to help him, but realizes that the advice that she gave about, having his friends help out and get involved was pretty much a mistake. And she felt bad and guilty about that in some respects.
Yeah, and that wasn't, it's interesting. These 2 episodes, especially, I think they highlight Matt's kind of not just weakness, but his kind of what's the word I'm searching for? Like he seems very down on himself.
Yeah.
Like he's talking about how this guy is faster than him and he can't beat him and all this. And she's just like, you need to let me stitch you up because you're bleeding all over everything. And he's all, he's all worried about Foggy and Karen. He's like, this guy could have killed them. And it was very a lot of anxiety, kind of self-conscious about his own choices.
Yeah, he's being self-absorbed about everything that's going on and feels, like he's to blame, and he's still trying and trying. And I think that's why we get more of kind of like what we talked about in the past about Fisk coming into his head. Yeah, talking him down, and it's I think it's Matt using Fisk in his own mind to push himself down, even though he continues the fight to do what he feels is right.
Yeah, and I've got some more about this in the next episode as well, because that's where we see it.
Yeah.
So, cool. So that brings us to my number 3.
Correct.
I thought it was interesting that Nadeem, when he brings the warden in and he's kind of questioning him about what happened with Jasper Evans, and the warden gets real defensive about it and finally says, that he's going to call his lawyer. And so we see, like we talked about at the beginning, that Nadeem is starting to get this idea. There's something more here with Fisk, that Fisk may be playing them for fools. And when he brings that up to his boss, it was interesting because I still suspect that his boss is the one who's giving information to Fisk, but maybe not. Maybe it is her boss. I'm not sure. But he tries to tell her to, she starts to call her boss. And he stops her and he goes, no, give me 24 hours or give me 2 days. I think is what he said. Give me 2 days to figure out what's going on. And she's like, do you want a pony too? And so I thought it was really, really interesting. If she is the one who's the leak, that she's, and maybe not, maybe she's not the one who's the leak. So maybe it was real truthful what she was doing. I don't know. I'm still on the fence about her.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, it's really weird with certain amount of characters that come into the episode, and you're like, where are they? Where are they functioning in this? And you don't know exactly where their role is, and it makes you doubt what's going on within the show itself. Yeah. So that would lead me to my number 3, which would be, Karen and Foggy talking to Nadeem, and Karen basically making it clear that it wasn't Daredevil. During that little conversation with Nadeem. It was pretty much an intense scene, but something that was pretty much needed based on what happened in the last episode. And you could see Karen how, with her conviction of what she was saying, and Foggy even mentions it too, and Nadeem is pretty much, making a joke like, oh, well, how did you know? You only met him twice. And she knew. And it's like, this is not how he reacts. This is not what Daredevil does. And Foggy going around, and, that will drop down to my first quote. So we'll actually talk about it. So Foggy basically states, if every fat guy with a white beard wears a red suit, does that mean they are all Santa? And then, Nadeem he turns around basically stating, he goes, well, if he puts a bunch of presents underneath my tree, of course I think he would be Santa. But the thing is that with in this case, this is outside of what Daredevil normally does. So he's pretty much attacking somebody who's pretty much innocent in a respect.
Yeah, I actually had this in my notes, so it's interesting that you bring this up because she's very particular to tell him no, that wasn't actually Daredevil.
Yeah,
and I think it's interesting. We find out later, then at the end of the episode when he actually meets Matt, and Matt tells him that wasn't him, that he's Daredevil, that he's the real Daredevil, that he buried the suit. The other guy, had another suit and all that. And so we start to see that Nadeem is starting to kind of figure this out and is starting to know, okay, this is, there's something more here.
Yeah, there's more there, and between these three people too.
Yeah.
Between Foggy and Karen, because you could tell that Nadeem understood that within that little meeting, that they knew something about Daredevil, but they weren't giving that information.
Yeah, and that leads, my number 2 is just the fact that Matt, Sister Maggie says something about, she's the one that kind of tells him, goes, well, where did you get the suit, and how good was the suit? And he goes, well, it was perfect. It was exactly like my suit. And so she's like, well, he can't just go buy that at Walmart. That's not, you can't just go, pluck that out of a costume shop.
Yeah.
And so that's when he realizes, and he goes and he finds Melvin, the suit maker. And then, he leads him to his new shop because that was a whole interesting kind of back and forth between them, because he says that he burned down his shop, but then Fisk built him a new one. And Matt says, well, take me to it. And so he goes there, and there's another suit there. And so the guy locks him in, and Matt realizes the guy has set him up and that the FBI is coming to get him. And so they have this fight.
Yeah.
And the guy is really, I think we talked about this in the first season or something, that this guy, or the second season, whenever he made that suit for him, that this guy isn't in the comics. This guy is a hero or a villain, some sort of.
Yeah, he actually, the character of Melvin Potter is actually a villain, and he was a suit maker.
Right.
That was a little bit of information, additional notes that I had. So basically, he was a suit maker, and he was the character, or a major villain for Daredevil in the comics, which was called Gladiator.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. So. Yeah, because he fights. I mean, he fights, and he gets some licks in.
Yeah, he
Matt,
knows how to fight. Yeah.
And that's something that I've really picked up on this season, especially as we've seen Matt get beat up a bit in this, and I know he's been weakened.
Well, he's also got
since
stabbed, and he's got stitches
that's what I'm
and
saying.
everything else. So he was kind of weakened in that state, and I think that's why how Melvin got over him. Now, mind you,
that's what I'm saying.
Now, mind you, in the comic, he Melvin Potter, who is Gladiator, has almost superhuman powers. So in this, they just made him a regular guy who's just a suit maker, which made sense for what they're doing within the Netflix series to make it more realistic in a sense. And I really like that. And that would be my number 2 as well, going into my number 2, which would be Melvin with Matt and, setting up Matt with the FBI. But that fight was pretty intense. And what, Matt was doing, he basically takes the saw blade and throws it, and he's able to do all these things to get away from the FBI at that point.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting that after Melvin gets arrested, that the lawyer guy kind of comes to Fisk and tells him that Potter's been arrested, and Fisk's like, well, he's irrelevant now. It doesn't matter. Which that leads to a whole nother thing that we see in this episode, or is it in the next, or is it in my notes? It might be in the next episode, or was it in this one where he goes and sees Betsy?
Yeah, in the next episode he sees.
That's the next episode. Okay.
Betsy,
so this is the one. This is the episode that actually ends with, which is my number 1, which is Matt having that vision of Fisk and kind of telling him that, hey, you left a simpleton to get arrested by the FBI, and you just slinked away, and it's kind of this whole thing of kind of playing on his inadequacies, and. It's not actually Fisk there, but no, it is this episode.
It is
this
it's
episode.
the end.
Because after that, he goes, at the very end, he goes and he meets Betsy, and he tells her that she should get out of town.
Yep.
And she kind of compares Matt to Kingpin, to Wilson Fisk. She says, you guys are both using Melvin for this. And I really think it's interesting that we're seeing Matt, he thinks Melvin's in danger. He thinks Betsy's in danger. But from what we can see, from what Wilson Fisk is saying is Wilson Fisk doesn't care about them anymore.
No.
He's just like, okay, well, I'm done with them. I don't need them anymore. I'm not going to worry about them. And so Matt kind of giving her this warning, it's not necessary.
No, it's not. It's just him trying to reach out, I think, and him trying to do what he thinks is right. But, and plus also to stay in good face in front of people or in the public eye and thinking that Betsy would do something, I think. And yeah, that was my number one as well. You know, it harkens back to what I was saying about Fisk in his head. So it's basically, it's Fisk telling him in his own head that he is failing at what he's doing, but yet he continues to persist and to do what he needs to do. And he's thinking, all right, I need to tell this woman. And obviously it's weird too, because Betsy didn't even realize that Melvin was picked up and she's a cop.
No, she's a parole officer.
Oh, she's a parole officer. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and some parole officers have like law enforcement, I guess, because she was wearing a badge and she did have a gun. So
Melvin had a record, so she had to know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, but it probably was one of those things where since he had just got arrested, nobody had told her.
Yeah.
Yeah. He had, you know. But yeah, that's that whole. It just. I don't know if it's Matt, you know, thinking that these people are in danger, but they're actually not, or it was a little much. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay, so that was our top fives. We went through those pretty quick.
But you had a few notes too.
We do, and I had one quote that I really liked was when Nadeem is talking to Wilson Fisk, and he says, "Your desperation diminishes you, Special Agent." I thought that was really, he's very precise in the way he speaks. And I really like how D'Onofrio is playing this
The
character.
way he enunciates is really amazing. It has that kind of candor, that tone to it, that harkens or just feels like it's the actual Kingpin. Now, mind you, he's not a big, hulking, large man, but he is a tall, physically large man in real life. If you look at the way that Vincent D'Onofrio actually portrays him.
Yeah, I had a couple of notes here. I thought it was interesting, the whole story that Nadeem tells Wilson Fisk about the Jiggy, the heroin dealer, and we have that same kind of thing where Nadeem is comparing Wilson Fisk to this guy and saying that you just use people the same way this guy was using people. It's a really cool scene. And then we have two other additional scenes in there that give us kind of glimpses into these characters. We hear Karen call her dad, and she's crying, and her dad just kind of dismisses her on the phone. And she says something like, you know, I was just trying to do the right thing and it went all wrong. And he replies, well, that's what you do. And I just felt so bad for her in that scene, because your dad, that's the one person that you should be able to go to, and he should be able to be the one to pick you up and encourage you, and not like put you down. And that's kind of what he did here. And then he kind of gives her a slap when not literally,
but slap to the face.
Because she says, "Can I come home?" And he's like, "No, it's not the right time, but you can call anytime you want."
Oh yeah.
And I was like, man, that's just,
Yeah, it's just, it just hits you in the feels. But she's always had problems. And if you looked in season 1, when Foggy and Matt first encountered her and Matt took her in and did all that, she had issues and problems. So she redeemed herself, got herself a job with them, and then eventually went into becoming a reporter and everything, and did well for herself. And I don't think her family ever acknowledged that or knew about what was going on. So they see it as, oh, you're calling me because you need something, but I'm always here. But that it's really sad. But I wish they brought, if they had another season, they could actually tap into that and see what she's doing. But obviously we don't. But it would have been nice to see that, so that way it's like, oh, okay, that's a redeemable quality of what's going on with Karen's story.
Yeah. Well, and then we also get a little glimpse back into Agent Nadeem's kind of home life, and I kind of went back and forth on this conversation with his wife, and I finally settled on that. I think it's really sweet that, she comes to him and she says, "You lied to me," because he had told her that he wasn't in the Bulletin building when the attack went down. And then she found out from one of the other agents' wives that he was actually in the building, that he actually confronted the bad guy. and then lied to her. And she's like, you can't lie to me anymore. And he's like, okay, from now on. And I really like that, because at first that could have been a breaking moment with their relationship, but it wasn't. It was a moment that made their relationship stronger.
Correct.
I feel so I really, really liked that kind of sweet moment between them. And then of course we finally get him and Matt meeting face to face. And we already talked a little bit about that, about, Matt telling him he's dressed in that original Devil of Hell's Kitchen garb,
the black, not
the actual Daredevil suit. And he tells Nadeem that he's buried that red suit, but the other guy brought it up, and that guy wasn't him. And then he says that guy is an FBI agent, and that's going to get into the next episode.
Yeah, it turns the gears in Nadeem's head at that point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to take the synopsis?
Sure. So the synopsis for episode 8, the title of Upstairs, Downstairs, is: a desperate Dex reaches out for help. Matt forms an uneasy alliance with Agent Nadeem, and Karen concocts a dangerous plan to provoke Fisk.
Yeah.
And no mention of Foggy in there, but okay.
Yeah, but Foggy actually did a lot too in this.
I know. That's like, they could have said something about Foggy in there, but I guess these synopses are just real brief. So, yeah.
I don't know if it was this episode of the last one where he got lucky with his girlfriend, and it's just like, whoa, that was uncomfortable. And I think Karen brought it up.
Yes, it is. It's funny because it happened in episode 7, but he talks about it in episode 8.
Yeah, I remember that part.
So yeah, that's one of my quotes from episode 8, because I actually was paying attention to which episode the quote is actually in, but the actual moment that he's talking about is in episode 7.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
All right, now on to our top 5.
I'm Daredevil.
And I'll go first.
Yeah.
Basically, Dex running up to Julie and trying to come clean and be a good person in the very beginning of the episode. You actually see it. He's doing the run with her as she normally does in the morning, but I like the plea to her and him being sincere about his intentions. He's just basically trying to reach out with, as messed up as he is. And I think she understood that, and she saw that, and she actually gives that information to him, saying, you should really be talking to a therapist about this. So basically, he thought a lot of her and wanted to be like her because he really liked her as a person and what she represented and how she helped people. And he thought maybe she could help him, but he also wanted to be like her. So he explains that to her in the coffee shop, which is pretty funny, too, in the end, because, he goes through the whole thing about the FBI. She goes, well, what about that? I was like, I kind of screwed that up. And then,
Yeah. I actually had this in my notes as well, was their little meeting there in the coffee shop, because it shows us some things that we didn't know before. It's really, really cool that we see that that there's a part of Dex that really wants to go back to that time with his therapist when he was a good guy, when he wasn't really doing evil things. And we see that moment when they focus in on the security camera there in the coffee shop, and we see that someone is watching them. And then, of course, later she comes back, and it took me thinking a lot about it and watching it through the second time to realize that she must live in the hotel now as well.
Yeah.
Because when she comes up to her floor, those same guys that are there at the end with where Wilson's little bat cave thing is, those guys are the ones that knock her on the head, steal her phone, and they hold up the phone to the surveillance camera in the hallway there where they are. And then later when Dex tries to text her, from the FBI office, I'm assuming that's either Wilson Fisk or one of the other guys responding to his text and telling him, leave me alone, don't call me anymore, and then blocking his number. And so he tries to call, and he gets all these things that say, your number has been blocked.
Yes.
And so it's interesting. I guess we're going to probably find out maybe in the next episode, or maybe later we'll find out kind of what happened to her, whether she's still alive, whether they killed her or what. But yeah, that was interesting that we're seeing that Fisk is really in control of more than just the hotel, more than just, he really is manipulating, like we talked about in the last episode, in last week's episode, he's really manipulating Dex a lot.
Yeah, he is. big time.
So my number 5 is finally someone looks at the video, reviews the tapes. I was just like, I didn't notice until the second time I watched it that's how Nadeem figures out that Dex is the one who Daredevil is talking about, who Matt is talking about, because we see him watch Dex on the monitor that monitors the FBI guys, and he sees Dex turn the cameras off. So I was really happy to see that, and to see this whole thing of that he's working with Matt to try to get this evidence, and he even sets up. It's really interesting. He sets up that whole meeting for Dex with that lawyer so that while he's busy, they can sneak into Dex's apartment and kind of search it. So it's an interesting level of manipulation there that Agent Nadeem has that we've not really seen that before out of him.
No.
So.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. So what was your number 4?
My number 4 would be Foggy basically coming to Karen at a certain point, goes to her apartment, and having the theory of Fisk being this quote-unquote kingpin of corruption. And then Karen tries to convince him not to go through with it for him to expose everything about Fisk. But I think she's just basically afraid for Foggy and herself. And, he brings the terms of Fisk's incarceration, and, she reviews it and looks at it and saying, well, this could be masked, or, this is going to be hard. And you're putting yourself pretty much in somebody's bullseye, and not to quote a phrase, but, or make a pun, but the fact that, you're putting a target on your head at that point.
Yeah, she says something like you can't make a plan because anytime you make a plan, he's going to be 2 steps ahead of you.
Yeah.
He's already thought of whatever your plan is, and he's like, no, he couldn't even see me coming. He wouldn't even know what this is about. And he starts to explain, and it's really kind of cool. This was actually my number 4 as well. So it's really cool. Foggy kind of figuring out what Wilson Fisk is doing, and he figures out that Wilson Fisk is getting rid of the competition so that he can figure out who they're bribing and who the Albanians were controlling. And now Fisk controls them. And he figured this out because Marcy was defending this some IRS guy who was taking kickbacks or something like that, and he starts to talk about it, and Karen stops him, and so it's really cool to see that. And then of course he tells her, well, we just write the story, we'll go, come to this endorsement dinner with me. It's a debate. I can't actually be there as a candidate, but because my father's meat business is a contributor to the campaign, I can be there in the crowd, and I'm gonna bring something up as the write-in candidate that he is. And then we get that whole scene there at the dinner with him talking back and forth to Blake Tower again. That was so good, and yeah, so it just really that this whole thing of Foggy figuring this out, and he's got it laid out all over the floor of the apartment as he's putting it together, and then that leads to one of my quotes that we'll get to when we get to our quotes that we already kind of talked about.
And that would lead me to my number 3, which would be Matt and Nadeem break into Dex's vault in his apartment and look for the suit. And Matt using his hearing to break into the vault, that was pretty cool. I like that idea. Kind of like a... I forget the name.
Like a safe
the Italian kind of job, thing. Maybe. It's like, Charlize Theron. And just using his ears. But in this case, he doesn't really have to be like right on top of it or anything. And he could hear the tumblers and figure it out, and then he gets into it. And then he finds the tape of the therapist in there, and he keeps it.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I didn't list the quote. I have a quote from that in my quote notes. But there's also a quote that he said that I almost wrote down, that when Nadeem asks him about, he says that he can smell the suit, and Nadeem is like, "You can smell the suit," and he's like, "Yeah, GSR and latex."
Yeah, he got it perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was really, really cool. And that's so that really is my number 3. That goes right into my number 3 as well, which is that when Dex comes back to the apartment and he's attacking them with whatever those glass things were that he took out of that hallway chandelier.
Yeah, it was like the little hanging chandelier pieces, and he throws them at the very end when he's fighting Matt at a certain point.
And he's shooting the gun, and it took me, this was another one of those things that it took me, I had to watch it a couple of times, I had to back it up and look at it a couple of times, that I realized that he was using their reflection in the windows across the street and then he was shooting the bullets and ricocheting them up the fire escape to where they would go into the apartment, the apartment above him. Because Nadeem first says, "Oh, he's shooting from across the street," and Daredevil's like, and Matt's like, "No, I think he's below us. I think he's ricocheting the bullets." He's in the apartment underneath us, and it's like, this is just crazy. This guy, and then he waits for him to reload because he says, I'll know when he runs out of bullets," and it's just
and
really
tells
cool.
him to
And then
run at a certain time, and he does, and then he gets away, and then on top of that, he's on top of Matt at that point with the fire escape and throwing those things like throwing knives almost directly at Matt.
Yeah, and Matt's got that lid, whatever that lid was that he was using to deflect him, and he gets up to the roof, and that's when the cops arrive at Dex's apartment, so he can't pursue Matt anymore. It's just a really, really cool kind of scene, and the way they shot it and the way they did it was really
it was
cool
a really
and fun.
good, intense scene, and it actually points true to what Dex is. Literally, he's bullseye. Come on, he's hitting every target. Look at those obstacles. He's using your reflections to shoot at people at this point, and his aim is on target too. So it kind of lives true to the actual comic book of what Bullseye was, in the sense that we don't get that kind of cheesy costume with the bullseye and everything on it.
Yeah. Or the Colin Farrell character with the scar on his forehead.
Head. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So that leads us to your number 2, I believe.
Yeah, my number 2 would be, you already mentioned it, Foggy's little speech that he makes at the dinner, and he was pushing it with Tower, the guy who's going for the DA position that he's opposing at this point. And he's just like spewing off at the mouth as he normally would, but he's just stating how he feels. And how, this guy's not going to do anything for you here. And I'm, basically making Tower's credibility look bad for being the next DA. And, and just Foggy just pushing for his running to be the DA, which is great. But then he has to leave right away at a certain point.
Yeah, because he looks down and he sees Karen's place card holder on her plate, and he realizes and then he figures out what she's doing, that she must have gone to see Wilson Fisk. My number 2 is very close to that. It's the fact that Karen does go to see Fisk there, and she convinces the FBI agents to call his lawyers, and with what she's saying, she convinces them to let her in to talk to Fisk, and the FBI says, "Well, we're watching you." But I realized after I watched it, as I kind of fast forward and looked at this the second time, that they were watching, but they couldn't hear. I guess there's no sound capabilities. Because at first I thought when they broke in there, because she confesses to Wilson Fisk that she killed John Wesley. And she says she shot him 7 times because that was all the bullets that she had. And you can see D'Onofrio, and he plays it so well. You see him getting, he's hyperventilating. He's getting ready to attack her, and he's breathing heavy. And it just was a really intense scene. But I didn't get what was her intention, because even Foggy couldn't understand. Did you want him to attack you? Did you want him to kill you in front of the FBI agents? And then, okay, now he's committed a crime. What was it? It was a little confusing to me.
It looked to me like she wanted him to attack her so that way she has something, and it would put him back in prison.
Yeah, I guess that's the only thing I could
just
think
to
of.
get him away so he doesn't have all this power in his little private little hideaway in his little tower, and have his own world. So where he was in prison before, where the prisoners were basically attacking him. So she wants him in, harm's way in a certain...
Well, no, she just wants him out. She just wants him
out of the picture.
Yeah, she just wants him back in prison. She wants him back in prison, because the whole thing was a little confusing, but it also made sense because that was the whole point. She said, if he commits a crime, we can get him back in jail. So I kind of get it, but it was a little confusing when the FBI broke in and they kind of put cuffs on her.
Yeah, it was a little extreme because, she was basically antagonizing him to the point where she wanted him to do something and he just wouldn't.
It was kind of funny, too, though, that Foggy, when she's released, Foggy goes, you should kind of take it as a compliment. And she's like, what do you mean? That they thought I would actually try to kill him? Because that's what Foggy must have told them, was that she was going to try to kill Fisk. And so that's why they broke in there. But yeah, it was just really, it's a really intense scene. So.
That would lead me to my number one, which I think you and I both are on the same page with this one. Basically, with Sister Maggie, while Matt is working out, he's below and she's above and she's praying. And he hears her and she's just praying to Matt's father and states, this is our son.
Our son, yeah.
And
that's crazy because, I mean, I guess if I look back on it, we haven't actually seen his mother. No. So I guess it's possible. And it did make a question in my head, though, of do you think, wouldn't she know that Matt could hear her?
I don't think she realized that. Yeah, okay. That was going on. But the thing is that I saw this coming a while ago, just basically of how she was, you kept saying how, no, she's just, she's in charge of him. She was there when he was a kid, just who she was. I just saw all that parental, that feeling of not judging, but, hey, this is what you need to do. And, hey, oh, you're going to give me this garbage. I'm going to throw this garbage back at you, and I need you to listen. And, and I think this stemmed with her praying and everything came from the idea of, in the very beginning, when she felt like she dropped the ball and saying, hey, you should get your friends involved because they care for you and they love you. Meaning that in her case, she couldn't really say to him, I'm your mother and I want to help you, but I'm trying my best. But I don't really know you in major respects. I do know you, but not that well.
Yeah, no, it explains a lot. It explains exactly why she was so willing to take him in, so willing to take care of him there in the first episode, willing to let him stay there. It makes perfect sense. It's just one of those things. I didn't see it coming. I just assumed she had this special bond with him. But yeah, I mean, to find out. I hope we get, with 5 episodes left, I hope we get some of this backstory to explain to us, why she left his dad, why she never told him growing up, why.
Yeah, because she left the order for a while, and then she came back. And I think that when she came back, I think that was when she had Matt, after she had Matt, and then she came back to the order because she felt she couldn't.
Right. That's what I'm saying is I want to get that story. I understand we can speculate. We can speculate all day long about how and what the order of events was. I want them to actually show it to us. I don't want them to tell it to us. I'd love for that. Now, if they don't, they don't. But it just goes back to that same thing. It's an interesting, twist to the season. And like I said, it makes some explanation of why she did some of the things she did and why she felt the way she felt.
Yeah.
So we had a couple of quotes here, and we've already talked about one, but I'll do my first one, which is what we already talked about with Foggy. Is that when he's talking about how he figured out Wilson Fisk's plan, he says, "I discovered this while looking into Marcy's briefs, more ways than one." And Karen kind of goes, "Foggy, ew," she kind of does the whole kind of sister kind of thing. Ew, I don't want to hear about that, So I thought that was pretty funny.
That was pretty funny. I only had one. Basically, that was Dex and Julie when they were in the coffee house and they were talking, and she asks him about, his thing with the FBI, what happened, and he goes, the borough needed a scapegoat. It was kind of lighthearted, and it kind of made her chuckle a little bit, but it kept her at ease. But it showed him trying to be a little bit kind of normal in some respect.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. My only other quote was the one we talked about the safe cracking, that when when Matt starts opening the safe, Nadeem says, "What? You can do that?" And he says, "Not if you keep talking."
Yeah.
So I thought that was I chuckled both times when I heard that.
I got a good chuckle out of that one.
So we've got a couple of notes here, some different things.
Sure.
I'll go with we already talked about my first one, so I'll do my second one, which is just Nadeem when he's in the car and he's trying to dress his wound, and he calls home and he's kind of talking to his wife. And I thought that was interesting because he calls his wife. He says no, he gives her this. He lies to her, tells her that he won't be home, and then he calls his boss and he says, we need to talk. And then the very next scene is where we see Fisk with Dex, and Dex telling him Nadim knows about me, and Fisk says, yes, I already know. We need to figure out what to do about this. So again, it just shows us that either Fisk has a tap on the boss's phone, which now I'm starting to think maybe that's what it is. Maybe he just has surveillance in the FBI offices. He doesn't necessarily need somebody to be giving him this information if he's getting it because he's, tapped their phones or whatever.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to find out.
And my only other note was, it was one of those things that, in fact, just the other morning, the smoke alarms go off in my apartment like at the slightest thing. The smoke alarms are going to go off. The fire alarms are going to go off in my apartment. This guy sets fire to a trash can on top of a table in his kitchen. Nothing. And then he just walks out, apparently, because we didn't actually see him put the fire out. The guy comes to his door, So I'm wondering if the next episode we're going to see his apartment his apartment building burned down.
No. Maybe this chalks up to New York, and it's like, not everything's up to code, and they haven't replaced those fire alarms.
He was in a really nice apartment, though.
Who knows? They probably haven't changed them in 20 years.
Could be.
Or the batteries.
It just was one of those things that I just kind of went, man. And then he just walks out. The guy comes to the door and says, we need to talk or whatever. And he just leaves the apartment. And I'm like, isn't there a trash can burning in his apartment?
Can't you smell it?
Yeah. So, yeah. I just thought that was
weird. It is weird.
So.
Glad you picked that up. Mine would be one of them would be Dex cleaning up his place in the beginning of the actual episode as he's listening to the actual therapist's tapes, and he's still in the costume as he's doing this with the headphones, and he's really strange, that's for sure. He's trying, but yet there's something going on there.
Yeah.
And then in the coffee shop, when he talks to Julie, there's an actual guy reading the newspaper in the coffee shop that's next to them, and you could see it from in the background, but I really couldn't read the front page, but it had the Daredevil on the front page. It was pretty much what was, about what was going on and that attack that happened. I wish they focused in on it so I could get a good view of it,
Yeah, good catch.
So basically, so far, I'm enjoying the show for season 3. I think it's great, but there's so much going on within the journey of all the characters that you knew that this was sparking for a 4th season.
Yeah, it just brings us back to that what we've said. I think almost every episode.
Every episode so far, yeah.
It's just unfortunate that we didn't get a season 4 out of this because there's so much they could have done with these characters. I'm more and more leaning toward this is going to end. Either this is going to end with them all getting back together and us, thinking that they're going to go forward, or it may even end in some sort of a cliffhanger that we don't ever get a resolution for. So I'm prepared for that if it happens. It's going to be unfortunate, but it is what it is.
Or maybe if Marvel picks up Charlie Cox as Daredevil and he shows up in a Spider-Man movie, that would be awesome. And be like, oh, okay, here he is. Yeah, I had to redeem myself and blah, blah, blah. Here's my short story. Okay. And then we go on.
Yeah.
But we'll find out. Hopefully one day. But that's pretty much it for the 2 episodes that we got. And on to a little bit of comic talk. So nothing new in the comics. There's a lot going on in comics. I haven't really been reading. I've been busy lately. Work's been crazy, but I do keep my ear and my eyes open to what's going on currently. And Superman Red Sun has come out on digital download recently. So I've already mentioned this in the past. This is a version of Superman who landed as a child in Russia or the old Soviet Union, because I think this takes place in the 80s or 70s at this point, but way back when. And, he is brought up in Russia and is brought up to protect Mother Russia at that point, the Soviet Union. A different take on the Superman story. I recommend everybody check it out if you're interested in it. There is a kind of visual comic that they have on YouTube of it, but this is the animated version, and it's pretty much almost like the old Superman cartoons used to see from the, I think that from the 30s or 40s. I'm not sure. They're colorized, it's got that nuance to it, the way they animate it, and the animation really looks good. Very similar to almost like how they did the Batman in the 90s.
Cool.
The Batman, the animated series. It has that kind of tone and look to it. So I recommend that to everybody.
Very cool. I only have my podcast recommendations this week are Strange Indeed on the Podcasting Network. They're covering Lock and Key from Netflix. And then, of course, as we talk about every week, the Star Trek Picard cast, which is on Talk Through Media. Check those out.
Yeah, they're awesome. So, I definitely highly recommend the Picard cast. And I do recommend The Language of Bromance with Sean and Richard. I just listened to one of them recently this week, and I was laughing. I couldn't stop laughing in the car. So I recommend them.
All right. Well, I guess let everybody know that you can hear us on Spotify, Google Play, and Apple iTunes, whatever podcast player of choice you use. If that podcast player of choice lets you give us a review, we would love for you to give us a 5-star review or whatever it is on whatever platform. We'd love to hear from you. You can check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/panels to pixels. We have a website, which is panelstopixelspodcast.com. We also have an email address where you can link up and talk to us there. You can send us an email, send us a voicemail, whatever you want, to panelstopixels1@gmail.com. That's panelstopixels1. The TO is spelled out right there in the middle, and the number 1 at gmail.com. You can also call us and send us a voicemail at 845-350-2095. We do ask if you use that number, make sure you mention that you are calling for the Panels to Pixels podcast so we can identify which show you're calling about. Again, that number is 845-350-2095. And finally, if you like YouTube, I don't spend a lot of time on YouTube, I will admit. But if you like YouTube, you can also catch our episodes there as well. In fact, I think they post to YouTube first before anything else. And that is just Panels to Pixels Podcast on YouTube. So check us out.
Yeah, check that out, and check out a couple of our friends that are out there. I would say the Grim Life Collective. Go check them out. I recommend them highly. They talk about a lot of spooky things. And Michael and Jessica went to Hollywood recently and went to a bunch of movie sets where they filming locations. So I would highly recommend you guys check them out as well. They did something recently where they went to where they filmed Roger Rabbit, as well as Back to the Future, the tunnel scenes and everything where they go in. So I found that very, very interesting. And they're very nice people. So I recommend check them out, give them a thumbs up, and subscribe if you're interested. So, listeners, you could hear us other places. So I'm a co-host on the Walking Dead Talk Through with Brian Malash on Talk Through Media. And with that podcast, we review The Walking Dead each week. This show, Panels to Pixels, will stay on the Next Level Podcast Network. But there will be always a link on our Facebook page for Talk Through Media. And actually, we will, when the new episodes, like for Picard, the Walking Dead Talk Through, or when we do Fear the Walking Dead Talk Through come up, we will post them on the Facebook as a link so you could follow that. Or you could just subscribe to where they are. You can listen to talkthroughmedia.com and get the podcasts there. Or you could go to Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We are currently working on a lot of things. There's another podcast in the works between Kyle McAdams and I. So keep in touch here or go to talkthroughmedia.com's website.
Very cool. And you can hear me here, of course, or you can hear my voice on various other podcasts that I submit voicemails to.
Yeah, you could hear him a lot. I love hearing Steve's voice on other podcasts. It's so fun, especially when he gets on Walking Dead Talk there, because he sends a lot of feedback there, too.
You guys do a great job, too.
Thank you. So, well, that's our show for this evening. Thanks, everyone, for listening. I'm Mark, and we will see you on the next panel.
And I'm Steve. Talk to you later.
And good night.